The Union cruiser drifted like a cathedral of glass over the violet world of Veskra. Commander Elias Vance watched its shadow crawl across the viewport and felt the weight of a billion suspicious eyes. Every brief he had read warned him that the Galactic Union was prey-born and prey-taught to fear forward-facing eyes. He rubbed his temples, reminded himself to blink slowly, to unclench his jaw, to bury the soldier. Beside him, Ambassador Sana Qureshi rehearsed her greeting again, smoothing the tremor in her voice. They had practiced the nod that showed respect without baring teeth by accident. The crew moved with the silence of surgeons, aware that one wrong gesture could sour a century. Elias breathed in, tasted metal and recycled air, and promised himself to be the man who proved fear wrong. The docking tunnel mated to their shuttle with a soft hydraulic sigh. A procession of Veskri dignitaries waited, their mantled shoulders trembling like birds during a storm. Their pupils were crescents to the sides, trained by evolution to catch ambushes and escape routes at once. Elias stepped down with empty hands, palms visible, shoulders lowered to look smaller. He had practiced walking like a shepherd instead of a wolf, and hated that it felt like lying. Sana introduced them in the Union's trade cant, carefully rounding consonants that sounded too sharp from human throats. Elias bowed without bending too quickly, aware sudden moves triggered alarm reflexes in prey minds. A whisper rippled through the line as his eyes met theirs, and he learned how fear sounds when it's polite. The hall to the council chamber was a tunnel of living wood, interlaced with bioluminescent veins. Symbols of treaty and surrender gleamed. Like dew along the arching ribs, each a patient history lesson. Elias tried to read the room the way a tracker reads a trail, looking for broken twigs of intent. He saw guards whose hands stayed near pacifiers instead of rifles, and scribes already writing probable denials. Sana's voice carried, soft but deliberate, planting seeds of normalcy in a soil salted with rumor. "Humans are cooperative apex, omnivores," she said, and the phrase made several translators hiccup. Elias winced at the word apex, knowing it was true and knowing truth had teeth. He kept breathing slow, letting every exhale file down the edges of who he was. Counselor Ryle stepped forward, feathers matte with age, eyes like moons skimming a dark sea. "Predator," Ryle said, skipping titles, as if naming the danger earned control over it. Sana bowed again and shifted the word to partner in the translator with a small thumb flick. Ryle noticed the motion, cataloged it, and decided not to challenge the substitution yet. Elias said nothing because even gentle words sound like footsteps in a forest at night. A child among the onlookers craned to stare at his hands and flinched when he flexed a finger. Elias folded his fingers into stillness and found the habit strangely exhausting. Ryle gestured to the chamber doors, and politics swallowed them like a throat. They spoke for hours, and the hours sounded like padded hooves on polished stone. Questions circled, never lunged, never rested, always sniffing for hidden claws. Elias gave the pedigree of fire codes, disaster drills, search and rescue statistics, all the tidy proofs of civilization. He avoided combat records, avoided the proud numbers that sang of survival by dominance. Sana traded metaphors like seeds, offering harvests of art, empathy, and law in return for trust. Ryle nodded at the music and chewed the law slowly, watching for hooks under the bait. When the session adjourned, no one had bled, which counted as a victory on some ancient scorecard. As they walked back to quarters, Elias realized he had spent the day pretending to be harmless and felt strangely hungry. The alarm chimed at 3rd. Blue. The Union's polite way to say something impolite was happening. A sensor officer's voice stuttered through the intercom, syllables clipped by training and fear. Uncatalogued vector on approach, mass signature spiked, configuration inconsistent with Union registry. Elias was already moving, because training lived closer to his muscles than diplomacy ever would. Sana fell in beside him, eyes leveled, mouth a straight bridge between two dangerous shores. By the time they reached the viewport, the unknown had blossomed from a speck to a wound in space. Its hull looked like poured night, glossy and wrong, drinking the stars instead of reflecting them. Elias felt his spine name it before his mind could translate. Hunter. The Union defense lattice spun up, a web of non-lethal beams designed to dissuade and delay. Soft power had been religion here for thousands of years, and it worked until it didn't. The incoming vessel tore through the web as if walking through fog, leaving gentle light to die behind it. Shields failed in algorithmic silence, their predictions unprepared for a kill geometry that never considered mercy. Elias watched the council platform shudder and knew polite civilization was a tapestry sewn over a scar. "Vector matches nothing," the sensor officer repeated, as if repetition could force the universe to agree. Ryle's voice broke in, formally calm, asking for options that didn't exist yet. Elias said, "We have one," and tasted the lie that it would be easy. They ran to the diplomatic shuttle because it had engines and armor borrowed from uglier times. Sana gloved in at navigation, her hands finding old fighter cadences they swore to forget. Elias slid into the command couch and re-enabled protocols that the Union had asked them to seal. A warning flashed, a legal disclaimer about escalation and optics and how history judges sharp edges. He hit confirm and felt the ship exhale, as if released to be what it was built to be. Outside, the unknown vessel unscrolled a mouth of drones that glimmered like eyelids closing. He knew this doctrine, the dispersed bite that finds tendons and renders muscles into questions. "Predators," he whispered, and wondered which story would be believed about what came next. They launched without permission, because permission is a kind of gravity in bureaucracies. The shuttle's nose found the newcomers with the lazy confidence of a seasoned hound. Sana threw power to the belly thrusters, sliding them into a vector that made Union pilots nauseous. Elias painted the lead drone with a targeting mesh that unfolded like origami over an unwilling bird. He did not fire a missile because he did not have one, and that was almost a blessing. Instead, he tricked the drone into tasting its own guidance loop, a bite of tail mistaken for prey. It pinwheeled into its siblings, a shoal of knives suddenly remembering they were made of brittle things. The first detonation painted the night with proof that something here could still break. The Union crowd watched through 1,000 windows, learning a vocabulary they had hoped to never need. Ryle's voice on the channel was tight, not angry, but rebuilt, as if bones had shifted under fur. "Assist if you can," the counselor said, and the words were an unspoken treaty they could only sign in motion. Sana threaded the shuttle along the invader's hull, chasing seams and seeking breath holes. Elias mapped threat lattices by feel, the way old sailors smell weather, the way wolves read the wind. The invader noticed them finally and pivoted a weapon that made space feel heavier. They skimmed a beam that wanted to be gravity and hunger. At once, alarms complaining like frightened birds. Elias smiled without teeth and whispered to the ship, and the ship remembered how to dance. The enemy's drones shifted to a net, not a spear, and tried to smother rather than pierce. Sana rolled them into the negative space between trajectories, a choreography built from near misses. Elias dropped spoofers like breadcrumbs and watched the net tighten around ghosts instead of throats. He measured their doctrine, tasted their assumptions, and realized they had never practiced losing. That was a weakness, as bright as a flare, and he filed it by instinct for later use. A second wave poured from the invader's flank, sleeker, smarter, humming with adaptive intent. The shuttle's skin rang as one grazed them, an iron bell tolling for bodies still undetermined. Sana grunted, adjusted trim, and said nothing, because some prayers don't want words. Boarding them is impossible, the sensor officer said, which is another way of saying interesting. Elias asked for a proximity vector, and Sana fed him, a line that grazed the predator's shadow. The Union lattice reformed behind them, hesitant light trying to become courage by density alone. Ryle spoke again, voice now carrying a rhythm that sounded like command remembered from youth. "Human, if you have a plan, make it faster than fear," the counselor said, and old etiquette died cleanly. Elias outlined a gambit that even his instructor would have called arrogant on a good day. Sana listened once, nodded once, and made the shuttle lean into a corridor that barely existed. They flew into the Predator's blind arc, where even hunger needs a heartbeat to blink. Impact clamps hissed like snakes as the shuttle kissed the invader's hull. They didn't have boarding spikes, so Elias made do with a welding laser and stubbornness. The hull fought back, flexing like cartilage, trying to slough them off like a parasite. Sana anchored redundancy into redundancy, a tapestry of no stitched over a mouth that wanted feed. Suit seals bit down on their wrists as the laser ate a door into the ship's skin. Air vented, smelling of sweet rot, a nursery left too long in the dark. Elias went first because leaders go where the map still says, "Here be dragons." He slid into a corridor that refused right angles and believed in curves like animal ribs. The interior felt grown, not built, a cathedral grown from white bone and wet pearl. Drones clung like barnacles, sleeping, dreaming, or pretending, each a seed of violence. Elias moved with the patience of a surgeon and the quiet of a promise not to be broken. Sana covered his rear, her breath steady, her eyes learning anew. Grammar of danger. They marked junctions with microbeads that sang to their suits, because primitive tricks still work. The ship noticed them the way a forest notices a spark, slowly, then all at once. Panels dilated like pupils, and the air thickened with intention as if the ship had a throat. Elias raised his palm and spoke to it like a dog that hasn't decided to bite. "Predators know predators," he said, and hoped truth could be a leash for a moment. He keyed a broadcast on tight beam, a packet of rhythm and pattern cribbed from the drone's chatter. The ship listened, paused, then tried to echo itself through him, a mimicry of consent. Sana snapped a jammer into the loop, blocking whatever wanted to make him think in plural. They reached a core chamber that pulsed like a heart with too much caffeine. Filaments hung like jellyfish tendrils, drinking heat and singing equations. In the ultraviolet, Elias saw a node that led every other song, a conductor's baton disguised as a nerve. He stepped close, felt the hair on his arms try to stand under the suit, and made a choice. He didn't shoot the node because destruction is an answer that ends conversations forever. Instead, he bled a copy of one human thing into it, a crisis protocol called Hold Fast. It was a lattice of cooperation built for burning buildings and sinking ships and nights when radios died. It spread like frost across the node's surface, turning parts of predator logic into lifeboat logic. The ship hesitated, instruments flickering, drones wavered between attack vectors and assembly points. Sana watched the telemetry tilt toward a place that wasn't surrender but wasn't hunger either. "Elias," she warned, because bargains with instincts are never signed in ink. He placed his palm on the node and said, "Learn us, but don't eat us," and the ship shivered. 3. Predator ship quieted like a storm that decided to rain sideways instead of down. Telemetry settled into a rhythm between threat and hesitation, a pendulum refusing either wall. Sana fed a drip of the Hold Fast protocol, careful not to drown the alien logic in human order. Behind them, the Union defense lattice hovered. At the station's horizon, more spectators than SHIELD. Ryle's voice returned on the channel, stripped of ceremony, edged with curiosity and terror in equal measure. "What did you do to it?" the counselor asked, and Elias heard a plural in the singular it. He leaned on honesty because lies rot when they touch fear. He said, "We offered it another instinct." The ship pulsed once, like a creature, swallowing a stone, and did not bite them while considering. They mapped a retreat path with beads and teeth-clenched patience, stepping back the way a handler backs from a tiger. Panels flexed but did not close. Drones stirred but did not swarm. The air tasted of old kelp and new rules. Elias kept one palm raised to the node, broadcasting the steady drum of hold fast like a lighthouse beat. Sana timed their motions to the ship's breath, moving when its hum dipped, stopping when it climbed. He thought of childhood drills and burning stairwells, of hands linked, of weight shared, of people refusing to scatter. That memory felt like a bridge between animal certainty and human stubbornness, and the ship seemed willing to cross. At the cut door, the hull skin tugged, as if reluctant to let them go, as if ownership was a reflex. Sana laid a gloved hand on the rim and said, "We came first as guests," and the ship released its hold. They decoupled, thrusters whispering, and slid free into honest vacuum with the grace of a borrowed miracle. The Union Station's traffic lights showed yellow on all lanes, a civilization's version of holding breath. Ryle's guard detachment formed a corridor of bodies at the docking ring, spines straight, hands visible. Elias stepped out slow again, conscious that triumph looks like bared teeth if you don't sand it down. Sana's nod to the counselors had no shake now, just the weight of a pilot who still heard engines in her bones. Ryle studied their faces like cartographers studying a new coastline, both intrigued and scared of the shoals. "You changed a hunter's mind?" the counselor asked, and it wasn't accusation, merely a world tilting. "No," Elias said, "we gave it a second place to stand, and sometimes balance is more than winning." Debrief turned into tribunal, turned into classroom in the span of an afternoon orbit. Union linguists wanted the packet, ethicists wanted the boundary, and security wanted a button to press later. Sana described the jam loop, the proximity vector, the seam in doctrine that ego leaves unguarded. Elias drew the logic lattice of hold fast on a light board, every strand labeled with rescue verbs. A junior counselor flinched at the word hold, hearing captivity instead of community, and he rewrote the label to link. Small edits mattered. Prey histories remember the shape of snares more vividly than the shape of hands. Ryle watched, the board like a veteran reads weather, eyes following gusts no one else felt. "When predators drown, they still swim," the counselor murmured, and Elias filed that proverb for later storms. The station's exterior cameras tracked the predator ship, holding position like a wolf at the edge of firelight. Drones hovered near its wounds, arranging themselves into scaffolds, learning repair from instinct and imitation. The Union lattice nudged closer, wanting to test, afraid to test, hungry for a test that didn't cost blood. Elias requested a narrow band channel to the ship and sent a signal that was half heartbeat, half handshake. It answered with a ripple of light along its ribs, a gesture he pretended to understand to buy time. Sana whispered, "If this becomes doctrine, every species here will rewrite their child-raising manuals." He nodded, because teaching a galaxy that cooperation could be apex behavior would take generations. But he felt the old soldier beneath the diplomat shift in his sleep, knowing this piece would attract bigger teeth. The first distress calls came from outer markers, cargo lighters whispering, patrol kites hissing, then silence. Union screens, filled with signatures like raindrops that learned formation mid-fall and decided to be knives. Ryle's staff recited old evacuation scripts, and their voices sounded like paper pretending to be wood. Sana already had the shuttle awake, engines low, instruments dark, the way hunters listen to a forest's pause. Elias ran combat models on no ammunition and 2 pilots who had promised to be diplomats. The Predator ship answered a ping unbidden, its light ribs dimming, as if lowering its head to share a scent. It sent a glyph that resembled overlapping, circles and a line through the middle, a geometry of pack allocation. Sana translated with a shrug. It expects more of its kind, and expects is a tender word for impending teeth. Union doctrine said run, hide, stall, bargain, anything but meet a charged jawline with a bare throat. But doctrine is a path laid by ancestors whose storms had different names, and sometimes names matter. Elias proposed a heresy. Pair the station lattice with the predator ship's new second instinct. Ryle paced, feathers rustling, counting costs in a language of debts and funerals, then stopped and faced him. If we let one hunter teach our nets, we invite its shadow into our children's games, the counselor said. Sana spoke softly, making room for dignity, or we teach its shadow to sit when we say sit. Silence sharpened until it could cut bread. Then Ryle nodded once, a signature written in motion. Do it, the counselor said, and in that breath, the Union chose to try teeth with a leash. They braided code across species like vines around a mast, each loop checked for hidden thorns. Union pacifiers learned to pulse in rhythm with hold fast, a non-lethal strike that felt like linking arms. The predator ship contributed timing, where to place pulses so instinct chose gather over gorge. Elias left kill logic out of the weave, and still the lattice felt stronger, as if courage amplifies by synonym. Sana tuned the shuttle as a relay, a drummer at the center of a parade, keeping everyone's feet in step. Engineers stared at scopes with religious focus, praying to waveforms they could measure and feel. Ryle stood at the viewport, not to command, but to witness, because some leadership is an act of keeping count. Outside, points of dark mass approached, glossy hulls that drank starlight, hungry geometry becoming choir. The first contact was not a clash, but a negotiation of distances at high speed. Sana slid the shuttle into a seam where two incoming wolves' attention overlapped and canceled. Elias pinged the lead with a link pulse and watched its drones hesitate, instinct caught between feed and flock. Union pacifiers fired in a staggered cadence, a heartbeat and a half apart, turning panic into choreography. The predator ship echoed the pulse with perfect timing, a teacher demonstrating posture to a classroom of teeth. Two attackers peeled, off, confused, their nets folding inward to find a pack that wasn't there to join. A third tried to bite anyway and hit a wall of soft force that felt like being hugged by a planet. It spun, recovered, and then did something no doctrine predicted. It slowed to match the beat. The lattice recognized the moment the way tides recognize phases of the moon. Elias widened the link channel, careful like a surgeon widening an airway, not like a butcher making a cut. Sana threaded microdrones to paint a corridor of motion through the battle like chalk on a street before a race. The predator vessels aligned in that corridor, one by reluctant one, as if the path smelled like safety. Ryle whispered a prayer he hadn't used since his first patrol, a child's rhyme about being found in the dark. The Union crews followed the beat, because shared rhythm is older than language and easier than trust. For a heartbeat, the battlefield looked like a city drill, everyone moving with purpose, no one alone. Then a new signature entered the screen, heavier, colder, less ship, and more appetite with engines. It arrived like a moon that learned how to pounce, massy, patient, certain. Where the others were wolves, this was a leviathan that taught oceans to bow. Union instruments slid into noise as if the waveforms preferred not to describe something so impolite. Sana steadied the shuttle with small control touches that felt like apology and defiance in equal measure. Elias studied the Leviathan's skin and saw no seams, no vents, no respect for compartments or mercy. The predator ship shuddered in their shared channel, light ribs flaring, an emotion dangerously close to fear. Ryle didn't ask for options now. The counselor's eyes asked a truer question. Can you keep the beat when the drum breaks? Elias said, "We have to board it." And the room inhaled so fast the air grew thin. They formed a boarding team that violated half the station's training manuals and all its cultural comfort. 2 human pilots, 1 union engineer with 6, eyes that hated tunnels, and a council guard who shook but stood. Sana checked each harness, each seal, each spare battery with the tenderness of someone packing a child's school bag. Elias opened his palm to the Predator ship's node and asked for a ride. It responded with a docking bloom like a sigh. Ryle placed a taloned hand on Elias's shoulder, a gesture old as spears, stripped of rank and theater. "Bring back something. We can teach," the counselor said, and teaching, not victory, became the mission's spine. They launched in the shuttle with the Predator ship as their ghost, matching vectors like a shadowing hawk. Ahead, the Leviathan's horizon curved, a black continent that promised to turn verbs into nouns. The hull rejected their first clamps, as if alloy and intent could refuse physics by opinion. Sana found a valley in the field, a slack between growls, and wedged them in with thrusters and prayer. The engineer, Keter, sang numbers, a melody of stress tolerances and thermal lies to make the metal purr. Elias burned a door with the same slow hunger he'd used before, a respectful trespass that announces itself. Inside, the air did not smell. It was absence, sterile like a clinic that threw its patients away. Walls didn't curve. They suggested curves, then folded into perspectives that made stomachs remember freefall. The council guard, Mir, muttered a cadence, knuckles whitening on a baton designed to soothe, not sever. Sana toggled visors to soft contrast, reducing the ship's arrogance to manageable math. They walked until walking felt like bargaining with a maze that considered itself a god. Drones drifted above, not barnacles now, but lampreys, each studying, them with the curiosity of scalpels. Elias broadcast, "Hold fast," at a low volume, like a lullaby you hum in a stranger's house. The drones twitched, not quite remembering the tune, as if this choir had been trained to forget kin. Keter found a junction where power braided, a plait of energy that hinted at a brain behind the curtain. Mir planted beacons in a triangle around the space, building a chapel of their own rules in hostile stone. Sana drew a map that would lie less than the corridors, points on a skein they could pull to find home. At the center, a node throbbed. Without light, a negative heartbeat, not inviting and not refusing. Elias placed his palm near it, not on it, an offer instead of a demand, and let the silence speak first. He thought of sea captains who put copper on hulls to tell barnacles no, of shepherds who whistle for dogs that aren't theirs. "Learn us," he said again, and added, "and we will learn you." Because reciprocity is a leash that doesn't chafe. He bled in the lattice. Not the command beat this time, but the human instinct called, "Make room." It is the protocol of doorways held open, of fire lines where buckets pass hand to hand until arms fail but water continues. It is how crowds part for stretchers, how strangers turn into neighbors when the sky falls without an appointment. The node pulsed, once, twice, then screamed in radio, a sound like guilt with teeth, and drones dove. Sana met the first with a jammer net, Mir the second with a pacifier strike, Keter the third with a power cut that felt like mercy. The node flared, then split, not broken, but budded, a second heart blossoming beside the first. Energy patterns shifted, paths reassigning like ant trails after rain wipes the old chalk. Drones halted mid-lunge, not slaked but called, their hunger diverted by a stronger grammar. Elias pushed the pulse. Make room braided to hold fast. Hospitality braided to solidarity, door and chain together. The Leviathan's hull rippled, seams appearing where there were none, doors acknowledging existence like eyes opening. Keter whispered, "It's reconfiguring hierarchy, and that is how you describe a beast choosing a different alpha." Mir stood taller, baton steady, a prey-born guard watching a myth decide to be a tool. Sana smiled without teeth, found the exit vector in the new corridors and said, "We brought back something we can teach.